The morning I drove that truck off the lot, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about how quiet the house had gotten since Carol passed. How I'd been eating cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row. How my son called maybe once a month, always when he needed something. I was thinking about how 67 years can go by and leave you standing in a dealership parking lot in Nashville, Tennessee, holding a key fob to a brand new Ford F-250 King Ranch and feeling more alone than you've ever felt in your life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story doesn't start with a truck. It starts with a phone call from my daughter. Her name is Nora. She was always the soft one, the one who cried at commercials, who brought home stray cats, who called her mother every Sunday without fail. When Carol got sick, Nora was the one driving 2 hours each way for chemo appointments while I was still pretending everything was going to be fine. I love my daughter. I want to be clear about that because what I'm about to tell you is going to make it hard to remember. Her husband's name is Blaine. I didn't dislike him at first. He was ambitious, I'll give him that. He sold commercial real estate in Nashville, drove a leased BMW, wore watches that cost more than my first car. He had that handshake, firm, 2 bumps, looks you right in the eye half second too long. The kind of handshake men like Blaine practice in the mirror. He was 38 when they got married. Nora was 34. I walked her down the aisle and I thought, okay, this man will take care of her. I was wrong about that too. Carol passed in October. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to gone. That's how fast it takes someone. The house we'd lived in for 31 years suddenly had rooms I couldn't walk into. Her reading glasses were still on the nightstand. Her handwriting was still on the grocery list on the refrigerator. Milk, lemon, the good coffee. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Nora called me 2 weeks after the funeral. She and Blaine had talked it over, she said. They had the spare rooms. Their house in Brentwood was big, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, the kind of place you buy when you want the neighbors to know you've arrived. She didn't want me rattling around in Nashville alone. She said she'd feel better knowing I was close. I should have said no. I know that now. But grief does something to your judgment. It makes an empty house feel like a punishment, and a full one feel like mercy. So I said yes. I put most of my furniture in storage, kept Carol's reading glasses in my shirt pocket, and moved into the guest room on the 2nd floor of my daughter's house in November. I paid no rent. Nora refused to hear of it. But I bought groceries, paid for dinners, fixed things around the house. I replaced the water heater when it gave out. I repainted the deck in the spring. I wasn't a freeloader. I want you to understand that. I was a 67-year-old man who had spent 40 years as a structural engineer, who had built his own home addition with his own hands, and I contributed every single day. Blaine never saw it that way. The first incident was small. I'd driven over to the grocery store one Saturday morning. Nora was at a yoga class. Blaine was supposedly working from home. I took Nora's car because mine was in the shop for a routine brake job. I was gone maybe 45 minutes. When I got back, Blaine was standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and an expression I hadn't seen directed at me since I was a teenager and got caught sneaking in past curfew. "That's Nora's car," he said. "She offered it," I said. "Mine's at the shop." "You should have asked me." I set the groceries down on the counter. I looked at this man who lived in a house he didn't own, whose wife's father was standing right in front of him, and I said very calmly, "I'll keep that in mind." I didn't say anything to Nora. I should have, but I didn't want to create a problem. I thought it was one bad morning. I thought it would pass. It didn't pass. Over the following months, the rules appeared one at a time, the way water damage appears, slowly, then all at once. The garage was Blaine's space. The back porch was where he had client calls. I needed to be quiet between 9 and 11 on weekday mornings. If I wanted to have my friend Terrence over for dinner, I should give Blaine advance notice because he needed to mentally prepare for guests. I once came downstairs at 6 in the morning to make coffee, and he was already sitting at the kitchen table. And the way he looked at me, like I was an intruder in my own daughter's house, which was my daughter's house because I had helped them with the down payment 3 years earlier. That look stayed with me. Nora noticed none of it. Or she noticed and didn't say anything, which is worse. When I tried to bring it up once, carefully, gently, she said, "Dad, you know how he gets. Just try not to push his buttons." That sentence. That one sentence. I've heard it before. I heard Carol's college roommate say something like it about her first boyfriend. I heard it from a neighbor years ago about her son. You know how he gets. What that sentence really means is, the reasonable person in this room needs to manage themselves because the unreasonable one has decided his discomfort matters more than yours. I let it go, again. My car came back from the shop. I drove it for 6 more months without incident. Then the transmission started slipping. It was a 2009 Silverado with 140,000 miles on it, and the mechanic in Brentwood told me it wasn't worth fixing. He wasn't wrong. The repair would have cost more than the truck was worth. So I told Nora at dinner one night that I was thinking about buying a new vehicle. Nothing fancy. Maybe a used pickup, something reliable, something I could haul lumber in when I helped my friend Ray with his renovation projects. Nora smiled and said that sounded like a great idea. Blaine put his fork down. "How are you planning to pay for that?" he said. The table went quiet. "I have savings," I said. "You sure that's a good use of your money at your age?" He said it like he was being helpful, like he was a financially responsible adult and I was a child who'd wandered into a conversation I didn't understand. I'm a 67-year-old man with a pension, a paid-off house I was renting out while I lived here, and 30 years of maxing out my 401k. I know what I have. I know what I can afford. I'll manage, I said. He shrugged. "Just saying. At your age, that money might be better in an account. What if you need in-home care someday? That stuff's expensive." He looked at Nora. "Right, babe," Nora said quietly. "He's just looking out for you, Dad." I picked my fork back up. I finished my dinner. I said good night and went upstairs, and I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, the room that still smelled like the lavender fabric softener Nora had used on the sheets since she was in high school. And I thought about Carol. I thought about how she would have handled this. Carol had a way of saying things that sounded like kindness but landed like a verdict. She would have looked at Blaine across that table and said something simple and final, and it would have been over. I missed her so much that night that it felt like a physical weight on my chest, but I also made a decision. The Ford dealership on Franklin Pike had a 2024 F-250 King Ranch on the lot. Dark agate metallic exterior, camel leather interior, crew cab, the works. The sticker price was $64,000. I'd been looking at it online for 3 weeks. I drove over on a Tuesday morning while Blaine was in his home office and Nora was at work. I met a sales rep named Pete, young guy, maybe 25, the kind of enthusiastic that hasn't been worn down yet. He let me take it for a test drive through Brentwood and out on the highway, and I kept both hands on the wheel, and I thought, yes, this one. I wrote a check for the full amount, no financing. Pete looked at the check twice and then looked at me, and I said, "Is there a problem?" And he said, "No, sir, absolutely not," and went to process the paperwork. I drove the truck home. I pulled into the driveway at 11:47 in the morning. Blaine's BMW was in the garage. I parked the F-250 right in front of it. I didn't honk. I just went inside and made a sandwich. He came out of his office about 20 minutes later. I heard the garage door, then silence, then his footsteps coming fast across the kitchen floor. "What is that?" he said. "My truck," I said. "You?" He stopped. "You actually bought it." I did. His face went through several expressions in about 3 seconds. Surprise, then something colder. "That's a lot of money." "It's my money," I said. "Did you need something?" He didn't answer. He went back to his office and closed the door. Nora texted me an hour later. He'd clearly called her, asking if we could all talk at dinner. I said of course. Dinner was quiet. Blaine was the studied kind of calm that means someone has been rehearsing. He said he wasn't trying to control me, he was just concerned. He said I was spending money impulsively and that it reflected poorly on my long-term planning. He used the phrase cognitive decline once, briefly, like he was testing whether he could get away with it. I set my fork down. "I'm sorry," I said. "What did you just say?" He backtracked immediately. He said he just meant that big financial decisions were better made slowly. He looked at Nora. She was staring at her plate. I said, "I've been making financial decisions since before you were born, and I've never once had to ask permission from anyone." I said it quietly, not angry, just clear. He didn't say anything else that night, but things shifted after that. The politeness got thinner. He stopped speaking to me at breakfast. When friends of his came over for dinner, I was not invited to join them. I found out the next morning from Nora, who seemed embarrassed about it. He started parking his BMW in the driveway, so I'd have to move my truck to street parking. When I asked why, he said he needed the garage for storage. His car was still in the garage. There was nothing being stored. Then one morning in March, I came downstairs at 7 a.m. and found my truck on the street with a tire completely flat. I checked the valve stem. It was fine. I checked the tire, no nail, no visible damage. I called the shop. They said it looked like the cap had been slowly unscrewed, letting the air out overnight. I didn't say anything that morning. I changed the tire, drove to the shop, had it checked, confirmed it wasn't a slow leak, drove home. I installed a dash cam with parking mode that afternoon, the kind that records continuously when the vehicle is parked, with motion activation. I didn't tell anyone. 3 weeks later, I came downstairs at 6 in the morning and looked out the kitchen window and watched my neighbor from across the street, a retired schoolteacher named Carol, ironically, walk her dog past my truck. She glanced over. Nothing unusual. That weekend, I found a long scratch down the passenger side of the hood. Not a key, something wider. Maybe a screwdriver. I pulled the dash cam footage. It was time-stamped 2017 a.m. The image quality was good. I could see a figure in a gray hoodie come down the driveway from the direction of the house, walk to the truck, lean over the hood with something in hand, and walk back toward the house. Blaine owned a gray Champion hoodie. I'd seen him wear it to check the mail. I didn't confront him. I called my attorney instead. Her name is Sheila Hodge. She's been my attorney for 12 years, handled Carol's estate, sharp as anyone I've ever met. I drove to her office in downtown Nashville on a Monday and laid out everything, the camera footage on a USB drive, photos of the scratch, the flat tire incident, Blaine's behavior over the past year and a half. She watched the footage twice. "This is criminal mischief," she said. "In Tennessee, damage over $500 makes it a Class A misdemeanor." "What do I do with that?" I said. "You file a police report, and then we talk about your living situation." I filed the report that afternoon. 2 officers came to the house when Blaine was out showing a property. I showed them the footage. They took the USB drive. They said they'd be in touch. Nora came home that evening to find the report sitting on the kitchen table. She read it 3 times. Then she sat down and looked at me like she was seeing something for the first time that had always been right in front of her. "He did that?" she said. "The footage is clear," I said. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Dad." That was the first time in 18 months she'd said that to me. Just those 3 words. And it mattered. It mattered a lot. Blaine came home at 7. He walked into the kitchen and looked at Nora and then at me and then at the copy of the police report on the table. He said, "What is this?" "The police have the original," I said. The color left his face. He tried to explain it. He said the footage was ambiguous. It could have been anyone. He'd heard something outside that night and went to check. He got louder as he talked, the way people do when their story is falling apart. Nora sat there and didn't say a word. She didn't defend him. The police contacted him 2 weeks later. He was cited for criminal mischief. The damage estimate on the truck's hood repair came back at just under $1,200. He had to pay for it. He didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after that, which was, honestly, the most peaceful 3 weeks I'd had since moving in. What changed after the citation wasn't dramatic. There was no single explosion. It was more like watching a tide go out, slowly, quietly, taking things with it. Nora asked me one evening if I'd been happy here. Not was I comfortable, not was I okay, was I happy? I told her the truth. I said I had been happy when it was just the two of us cooking Sunday dinners. I said I had not been happy watching my son-in-law treat this house like a kingdom and me like a tolerated inconvenience. I said I missed having my own space. She nodded. She cried a little. I handed her a paper towel. I've never been great at these moments, and she laughed through the tears, which felt like Carol. Sheila had already been doing some work on my behalf. My rental house in Nashville, the one I'd been renting out since I moved to Brentwood, had tenants whose lease was up in April. I'd been vaguely thinking about selling, but Sheila suggested I consider moving back, so I did. I told Nora in February. I was moving back to Nashville in April, back to my own house, my own space. She hugged me for a long time in the kitchen. She said she understood. She said she was sorry it had gotten to this. I told her she wasn't responsible for her husband's behavior, but I also told her, gently, carefully, that you know how he gets was not something I ever wanted to hear her say again about any person in her life. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I know. I moved out on April 12th. Ray and his son helped me with the furniture I had in storage. We had the house set up by 6 in the evening. I made everyone hamburgers on the back deck. My neighbor from Toll Doors Down, a man named Chet, who I've known since the 90s, came over and brought a six-pack, and we sat outside until 9, watching the bats come out over the backyard. It was the first evening in a long time I can remember feeling like myself. There's a postscript to this. About a month after I moved back, Nora called me on a Sunday morning. She'd been seeing a therapist, her idea, she was quick to say. She was working through some things. She said she'd been reading about what she called controlling behavior in relationships, and she wanted to talk to me about what she'd noticed in her own marriage. We talked for 2 hours. It was one of the most honest conversations I'd had with my daughters since Carol died. I updated my estate plan that spring. Sheila and I sat down and went through everything. I didn't cut Nora out. She is my daughter, and what happened wasn't her fault. And I believe she's doing the work to understand why she stayed quiet for so long. But I made some changes. I set up a trust with specific provisions, and Sheila explained very clearly that certain assets would not automatically transfer to a spouse in the event of Nora's death or divorce, and that I had the right to revisit all of it at any time. It wasn't punishment. It was clarity. Blaine's criminal mischief citation is part of the public record in Davidson County now. He paid a fine and did community service, 40 hours at a food bank, which I hope taught him something, though I doubt it. My truck still runs beautifully. I use it every week, hauling lumber for Ray's projects, picking up mulch for the yard, sometimes just driving out on the highway south of the city where it opens up and you can see the hills and the sky gets wide. Some mornings I sit on the back deck with my coffee before anyone else is awake, and I think about Carol. I think about how she would have handled this whole thing in about 20 minutes. I think about her reading glasses in my shirt pocket, still there after all this time. I think about how she used to say that dignity was the one thing nobody else could take from you, that you could only give it away yourself. I stopped giving it away in that driveway on a Tuesday morning in November when I pulled a $64,000 Ford pickup into the sun and a man in an office 20 feet away couldn't do a single thing about it. That's when this story really started, and that's where I'm happy for it to end. I've had a lot of time to sit with all of this, mornings mostly, out on the back deck with my coffee, watching the light come through the trees the way it does in April in Nashville, slow and sideways like it's not in any hurry. What I keep coming back to is how long I let it go on. Not because I was weak. I don't think I was weak. I think I was grieving, and grief has a way of making you smaller than you are. It makes you want to keep the peace, because peace feels like the only thing left that isn't broken. So you absorb things. You let a comment slide. You say, he didn't mean it that way. You pick your fork back up and finish your dinner, and go upstairs and sit on the edge of a bed that smells like lavender, and you miss your wife so much it feels like drowning, and you tell yourself it'll get better. It doesn't get better on its own. That's the thing nobody tells you. Situations like the one I was in, where one person in a household slowly expands their sense of authority until it covers everything, until you're asking permission to use a car in a house you helped pay for. Those situations don't self-correct. They escalate. Every time I absorbed something without responding, Blaine took it as confirmation that he could push a little further. The flat tire, the scratch on the hood, the word cognitive decline at a dinner table. Each one was a test. Each one was him finding out where the floor was. The floor turned out to be a parking lot on Franklin Pike on a Tuesday morning. I don't think the truck was about the truck. I know that now. It was about whether I still believed I had the right to make my own decisions, spend my own money, live my own life, without asking a 38-year-old man for his opinion on any of it. When I wrote that check, I wasn't just buying a vehicle. I was answering a question that had been sitting in my chest for 18 months. The answer was yes. I still believed it. What happened after that followed naturally. Not as punishment, not as luck, just as consequence. When you stop letting people redefine who you are in your own story, they lose the one tool they had. Blaine's control over that household depended entirely on my silence. The moment I stopped being silent, the truck, the dash cam, the police report, Sheila's office, the whole arrangement fell apart, because it had never been built on anything solid to begin with. I think about what Nora said on the phone a month after I moved out. She said she'd been reading about controlling behavior and she was starting to recognize things. That conversation mattered to me more than any of it, more than the citation, more than the trust, more than watching Blaine's face go pale in that kitchen. Because Nora doing that work, on her own for herself, that required something from her. Courage, maybe, or just honesty. Either way, it was hers. That's what I'd want anyone to take from this, if anything. Not the truck, not the check, not the dash cam footage. Just that, the decision to stop shrinking is always available to you. At 67, in a guest room that smells like someone else's fabric softener, in the worst year of your life, it's still available. You just have to decide you're worth the inconvenience of making it. Carol always said dignity was the one thing nobody could take from you. You could only give it away yourself. I stopped giving it away. Everything else followed from that.